Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the desert sands of ancient Egypt, where the sun sets in orange sheets behind temple columns. The Nile glistens like melted copper in the distance. You're walking slowly, now bare feet against warm stone, your sandals tucked under one arm. You pass under papyrus-shaped pillars and into the shaded courtyard of a noble estate. And there, just by a lily-covered pond, a pair of eyes watches you. Wide, glistening, impossibly gentle eyes. A gazelle. Not a wild one, not bound for a banquet. It's just there, quiet, blinking slowly. A pet. You might think you'd thrive in ancient Egypt, but be honest, you probably wouldn't last a day. Between the heat, the linen dress codes, and the sheer amount of incense, your modern senses would tap out by mid-morning. But that's okay. You're not here to survive it. You're here to drift through it. Just before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know. Where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Drop it in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in Thebes now, or maybe Memphis. The precise geography doesn't matter, because the air here feels timeless. It smells of myrrh and warm stone, and your footsteps echo lightly in the halls. This particular noble family, whose name is faded from records, is part of the rising elite class of the 18th dynasty. They own land, supervise workers, and they own pets, snot cats, although there's one sprawled across a sunbeam in the hallway. No, this household favors something a bit more. Leggy, a slender Nubian gazelle, tan as the dunes, tiptoes around the courtyard with all the caution of a dancer in a borrowed room. You watch it move like smoke over tile. It seems more like a living sculpture than a real animal, but it's very real. You hear the gentle clack of its hooves on stone, the soft huff of breath through its long nose. It pauses to inspect a date dropped from the breakfast tray. It sniffs it, declines it, typical gazelle. You follow a servant as they refill the water bowl, a wide alabaster dish, half full of lotus petals. Not necessary, but it adds a nice touch. The gazelle dips its head and drinks in long, still sips. You're told her name is something untranslatable now, but it roughly meant whispers among lilies. A name both accurate and poetic in the way ancient Egyptians so often managed. This gazelle isn't unique. In fact, pet gazelles were a genuine trend for centuries. The Egyptian elite, especially in the New Kingdom, developed a taste for the exotic. While cats were revered and monkeys were mischievous, gazelles held a special place as delicate, emotional companions. They were symbols of grace, gentleness, and control, qualities that aligned well with the ideals of high status. But before you picture children tossing a ball around with one, hold on. Gazelles are, by nature, twitchy. They spook at loud sounds, sudden movements, the mere idea of a breeze changing direction. So owning one meant crafting an environment that was by design. Still elegant. Owning a gazelle was a lifestyle choice, not unlike buying an incredibly temperamental espresso machine today. It looked great, but the maintenance was a whole personality. You're handed a folded scroll, part inventory, part brag sheet listing the noble's household items. Among the items, 2 ivory headrests, 12 pommet sandals, 1 water clock, 1 gazelle of Nubian origin. Listed between furniture and a pet monkey. No elaboration, just a name. But its placement tells you everything. This animal was part of the family, Some scholars argue the animals may have been decorative more than beloved. There are tomb paintings that show gazelles standing beside their owners, not unlike houseplants with hooves. But there are also depictions of them eating from hands, curled near feet, and even sharing bedsol, though. That last one might be symbolic or aspirational. Historians still argue whether these images reflect everyday life or idealized dreams.
Either way, the gazelle clearly mattered.
You trail behind as the household prepares for the midday rest. Slaves draw sheer linen over the windows, softening the light into golden stripes. The gazelle curls beside a cushion, legs tucked delicately beneath her body, like a cat who's just realized she owns the room. The servant kneels and fans her gently with ostrich feathers, partly for comfort, partly for show. Another member of the household, possibly the lady of the house. Though records blur, her identity enters and offers the gazelle a bit of fig paste from a glazed dish. It's accepted this time. A small victory. The woman chuckles softly, strokes the gazelle's ear, and settles nearby with a reed pen. She begins writing a letter. The animal stays. You overhear fragments about grooming routines. Sandalwood oil for the hooves, a fine comb for the fur, no collars. Those were reserved for parade animals or royal processions. House gazelles roamed free or within carefully enclosed gardens. Gardens with trimmed hedges, shallow pools, and high walls to discourage leaps. A startled gazelle could clear nearly 6 feet if it wanted to, but a well-loved one, she stays put. Some guests arrive from a neighboring estate, and eye the gazelle with polite interest. One leans down and tries to feed it a honey date. Rejected. The guest hides the fruit quickly and pretends they were never holding it. You suppress a laugh. Outside, the breeze carries the scent of baked earth and something green papyrus, maybe. It's a warm smell, like history stretching out under the sun. And inside this quiet house, a gazelle naps beside a noblewoman who's now dozing mid-sentence, pen drifting across the page. You watch the rise and fall of her breath, and beside her, the same rhythm slower, longer, but in sync rises from the sleeping pet. There's a soft clatter in the distance. The gazelle's ears twitch. You hold your breath. She doesn't move. The sound fades. She blinks, then closes her eyes again. You're still standing in the doorway, but everything is quieted. The servants have vanished behind curtains. The guests are whispering over wine. And in this still and scent-sweet air, the oddness of it all feels perfectly normal. That you're in a desert palace, the nobles sleep through noon, that a wild animal, usually hunted for sport, now dreams beside its humans. And maybe, just maybe, you're starting to dream too. The light shifts slightly in the courtyard as the sun glides lazily toward afternoon. You don't notice it at first, just a warmer tint on the walls, a gentler shadow falling across the tiled floor. The gazelle wakes first, of course. You hear the smallest exhale, the shuffle of hooves as she unfolds herself with almost exaggerated grace, as if being watched. She is, always. She stretches not like a dog or a cat, but something more precise, like a swan folding out of sleep, limbs long and angular. Her ears rotate toward the nearest sound, the slosh of water being poured in a distant hallway. Then, after one long, soft blink, she begins to move again. You follow, but you already know you're not in charge. She leads. Through a tall archway of vine-wrapped stone, the gazelle enters the shaded walkway surrounding the central courtyard. Here the air is cooler. You pass small oil lamps still unlit, empty baskets and jars that once held rosewater. And then there she is again, standing at the edge of a wide pool, its surface still and blue-green. Lotus flowers bob gently. Their petals look like they've never been touched by time. This place is part of the private wing of the estate, somewhere between a pleasure garden and a bathhouse. Only the household's family members and their closest attendants come here. And of course, the animals. You spot another gazelle now. This one smaller, probably younger. The two approach each other tentatively. A quick sniff, then a light butt of heads, and they go their separate ways, socializing Egyptian style. In the background, a servant appears, holding a dish made of carved wood. Inside, softened barley mash, dates, and a drizzle of milk. You don't get to try it, but the gazelle does.
Yes.
She walks over and begins to eat with careful, deliberate bites. You're told that gazelles are picky eaters, and that their digestion, how did the scribe put it, prefers quiet. Same. This is where the daily rhythms begin to make sense to you, the Egyptians, especially those of noble birth. Oriented their entire household around patterns of balance, stillness, and control. Chaos was a foreign concept, something associated with enemies, deserts, and spirits of disorder. So even their pets reflected this philosophy. A gazelle could be graceful, calm, ornamental, but only if its environment allowed for it. A single shout, a dropped cup, a child's sudden sneeze, and poof, your elegant creature bolts into the reflecting pool. That's why the architecture matters. You begin to see it. Low walls, curved edges, wide open spaces that guide motion rather than block it. The entire estate is designed like a whisper, and the gazelle is its punctuation. You pass a servant trimming herbs near the fountain. She's humming a tune you can't place, but it seems to match the mood. She notices you watching the gazelle and offers a slight smile. She dreams sometimes, the servant says softly. Sometimes she runs in her sleep. You nod, as if this explains everything. Inside the house, you spot small signs of the gazelle's life. Scratch marks on a doorframe, a narrow bowl of salt left on a pedestal, a decorated cloth with what looks suspiciously like hoof prints. These pets weren't just decorative, they roamed, had territory, preference, personality. There's an old story the servant tells you about a nobleman who refused to eat until his gazelle had been fed. The animal had become a sort of emotional barometer for the household. If she was restless, so was he. If she was calm, all was well. Some whispered that the animal was enchanted. Others said she had simply learned to manipulate everyone with her eyes. Either way, she was fed first. Historians still argue whether these pets were truly beloved in the way we love animals today, or whether they were just more pleasant to look at than geese or goats. Some records call them companions, others simply list them under livestock. The ambiguity remains, as does the art beautiful. Intricate tomb paintings showing gazelles standing by their owners or prancing between date trees. Always elegant, always in profile, always still. You step into a side room now, cool, shaded study filled with scrolls, palettes, and half-finished ink sketches. One sheet shows a gazelle, mid-leap, legs curled, eyes wide. The lines are delicate. Someone spent real time capturing that movement, and you wonder if they were drawing from life. Maybe the very animal you've been following. On a nearby shelf, you notice something odd. A miniature sculpture carved in ivory, no taller than your hand. It's a gazelle, of course, and it rests atop a small box with hinged sides. A jewelry case, maybe, or something more sentimental, a keepsake from someone long dead, but clearly still holding on to the idea of this soft, nervous creature. You hear a rustle. The gazelle is back, now inside the room. She walks carefully among the scrolls, sniffing at a papyrus but deciding not to chew it. Good call. The room feels smaller with her in it, more intimate somehow. She carries stillness with her. I sit near the low writing table, watching her move through golden shafts of afternoon light. And for a while, you just breathe. She moves. You observe. Time slows. You're struck by how odd this would have seemed to you just a few hours ago. A gazelle as a house pet. Surely too skittish, too wild. But now here in this heat-softened room, surrounded by the quiet scratch of reed pens and the smell of pressed herbs, it feels perfectly logical. It's not about utility. The Egyptians didn't keep these creatures for milk or meat. They kept them, it seems, because they represented something: grace, serenity, the joy of watching a beautiful thing do nothing in particular. In a world full of ceremony, noise, and conquest, there's a certain luxury in silence. The light shifts again. Shadows stretch. And once more, the gazelle curls down, knees folding in like origami, body coiling into a tight little dream shape. She sighs once. And then stillness. You stay a moment longer, not moving. The walls are painted with simple lotus patterns. The fan above you creaks softly. In this quiet, the only thing you hear is your own breath and the soft click of hooves just beyond the door. The early evening begins its slow approach, and the house responds without speaking. Lamps are lit, curtains are drawn. Someone somewhere plucks a soft tune on a harp, the melody weaving through the rooms like silk thread. You step back into the courtyard, and the air has changed cooler now, touched with the first sigh of night. The gazelle is already waiting there. She stands still, perfectly poised, ears flicking toward distant sounds. You get the sense she knows this is her time. No more guests to dodge, no more figs to refuse politely. Just the quiet, the garden, and the hush of falling sun. But tonight, something's different. You're ushered toward a side gate of the estate, one that leads into the fields beyond. The servant smiles and explains, some nobles take their pets walking in the outer gardens just before moonrise. It helps them sleep. You're not sure if she means the nobles or the gazelles. You suspect it's both. Outside the estate's wall is a narrow path lined with tamarisk trees and shoulder-high reeds. The Nile, distant but ever-present, murmurs behind the wind. The gazelle walks ahead, guided by instinct and habit. Her hooves make almost no sound on the packed earth, but you follow, because there's nothing else to do. You learn that while pet gazelles were more common among nobles, they occasionally appeared in the homes of the wealthy middle-class scribes, priests, high-ranking artisans. Not everyone could afford the food, the space, or frankly, the patience required to keep a skittish, anxiety-prone antelope indoors. But those who did, oh, they made sure everyone knew. A merchant's wife, for example, once commissioned a mural where her household gazelle was painted next to her children's same size, same placement. In a way, it was a subtle status message. Look what we can afford to love. Not something useful. Not something sacred. Just something beautiful. You walk past a small shrine nestled among reeds. A faded carving shows a woman pouring water into a bowl as a gazelle looks on. It's unclear if this was meant to be a religious offering or just a cozy domestic scene immortalized in limestone. Historians still argue whether these depictions were ceremonial or literal. Some even suggest that the gazelles symbolized a kind of emotional, wealthy softness in the household that had been earned, not inherited. Your guide points out a low enclosure further along the path. It's overgrown now, but once served as a kind of petting garden for the estate. Here, young children could interact with the gazelles, feed them handfuls of barley, or attempt to braid flowers into their fur. This last one rarely worked out the gazelles ever particular, often sneezed the blossoms right off. In the hush of this fading light, you imagine a family strolling together. The nobleman with a staff, his wife in linen robes. The children giggling softly as a pair of gazelles trot just ahead, pausing now and then to sniff a vine or twitch at invisible flies. The entire scene has the sleepy pacing of a bedtime story, slow, fragrant, and oddly delicate. A breeze moves through the reeds and the gazelle turns her head sharply, just for a second, then relaxes. You're told she used to be more skittish, but she's learned the sounds of the garden. The rustle of papyrus doesn't frighten her anymore. It's the unexpected that gets her. A dog barking, a loud laugh, a dropped amphora. One story floats around this estate about a noble's birthday feast years ago. The family decided to let their pet gazelle mingle with guests in the courtyard, certain of her good behavior. All went well until someone clanged a brass cup too hard. Gazelle panicked, darted through the wine table, and ended up nose-deep in a tray of sweet cakes. A total mess. But instead of punishment, the incident was retold for years with laughter. Even our gazelle loves pastries, they'd say. You get the feeling they loved her more after that. The stars begin to prick the sky as you walk back toward the estate. The gazelle hesitates, glancing toward the fields, then back at the gate. She chooses home. Smart creature. Back inside, the house has changed again. The light is softer now, coming only from oil lamps, and moonlight bouncing off polished stone. The servants move more slowly. The noble family is gathering for their evening meal, not the formal feast, but the quiet one. Bread, fish, dates, nothing too loud. You notice the gazelle watching them, not begging, just present. She's part of the scene, but separate. Respected, but not fawned over. And yet when the youngest daughter breaks off a piece of bread and offers it to her, the gazelle takes it gently, like a secret. It's in these small acts that the truth of her role becomes clear. She's not just a pet. She's a thread in the fabric of the household. She's the creature that teaches the family to move slowly, to speak softly, to watch where they step. She doesn't bring protection or profit. She brings pause. There's a theory that ancient Egyptians believed animals absorbed the energy of their environments. A peaceful animal meant a peaceful home. Whether you buy that or not, it's hard to argue with the mood in this place. Nobody's shouting, nobody's rushing. Even the shadows fall gently. And so the gazelle curls into herself again beside a doorway, this time just close enough to be part of things, but far enough to keep her space. You sit nearby, your back against a cool wall, watching the scene unfold like a slow mural. Nothing much happens, which is exactly the point. You close your eyes for a moment, not quite asleep, but further from wakefulness than you were an hour ago. You hear the distant notes of a flute, the sound of pouring water, the gentle snort of a settling gazelle. You begin to understand. This isn't just history, it's hospitality. It's architecture for the soul. It's the slow art of making room for a creature that demands stillness, not with force, but with fragility. Later that same evening, the house quiets again. The family retires to their private rooms. A servant tiptoes through the hallway, lighting tiny dishes of incense, their smoke curling upward like the softest questions. You follow the gazelle, still awake, as she moves with intent through the shadows, and hurried, but alert. She turns into a corridor you haven't noticed before, less ornate. The paint on the walls is older here, faded reeds, chipped lotus blossoms. This wing doesn't get as many visitors, and yet it smells of recent presence, oil, grain, polished wood, a quiet sort of use. The gazelle pauses before a low doorway, then pushes through with her nose. Inside is a room that could only be described as a halfway space, half storage, half retreat. Along the wall are carved niches holding old vases, folded textiles, and what looks like a small writing desk covered in dried paint flakes. But dominating the room is a long, low bench wrapped in worn linen cushions, and in the center of it is a shallow tray filled with dried herbs, a few withered figs, and a flat dish of water. This is her room. Not officially, of course. No scroll declares it. But clearly, someone made this space for her, somewhere she can sleep when the courtyard is too busy or the weather too loud. You sit down quietly, watching as she steps onto the cushion. Circles once twice and finally lowers herself into the softest spiral of fur and bone. You wonder how many other noble houses had spaces like this. Not for humans, but for the animals that lived beside them. Some archaeologists have uncovered courtyards with low sandstone platforms, oddly shaped basins, and smooth corner niches whose use was entirely clear, till they matched the wear patterns with the habits of small, hoofed animals. It's likely that gazelles weren't simply tolerated indoors, they were accommodated. Their needs quietly folded into the design of the home. And this wasn't just an Upper Egypt elite practice. We've heard stories from other regions and smaller cities near Sight, or even tucked along the delta where farmers or scribes kept captured baby gazelles, raising them with a mix of fascination and mild regret. One text fragment reads, "He comes to me for barley, but I know he dreams of the wind." That's the thing about gazelles. They always look slightly elsewhere, like their real life is happening just beyond your reach. Here, in this quiet room, though, there's no distance. She is utterly here. Her breathing slows. Her long lashes close. She twitches once, perhaps mid-dream, and then stills again. Carved stool catches your eye. You move closer, gently lifting it to inspect. On the underside, someone, perhaps a bored teenager with access to a sharp stylus, has etched a little gazelle. No names, no fanfare. Just the outline of an animal, sketched with surprising elegance. Legs folded, eyes closed. You imagine the moment? A sibling, maybe, waiting for a scroll delivery? Or avoiding a lecture on etiquette? Absently carving the image of the house, pet possibly watching her nap while doing it? Just another member of the family turned into idol art? There's a sort of melancholy here, too. It's not sadness exactly, but a softness. You get the sense that even though the gazelle is pampered, well-fed, protected, she is always slightly apart. Not just because of species, but because of temperament. She lives here, but she is never of here, and that distance makes her precious. Your guide appears again, as if summoned by your thoughts. She carries a small basket of offerings, dried sycamore figs, pressed barley cakes, a sprig of mint. "We leave these for her," she whispers, as she sets them gently on the tray. It's not because she needs them, but because she notices when they're not there. You nod. Of course she does. There's a faint scratching sound. The gazelle opens one eye, then closes it again. She's not worried. Not now. And you begin to wonder, what other roles did these creatures play in this society beyond simply being cute and quiet? Records from temple inventories mention animals kept for ceremonial calm, not for sacrifice, not for labor, but as living presences within holy spaces, embodied stillness, a kind of spiritual air freshener, if you will. And the gazelle with her precise steps, soft fur, and habit of freezing at every sound may have fit that role better than any beast of burden. Historians still debate whether temple gazelles were the same as noble pets.
Owls.
Some argue that the sacred animals were never allowed outside religious grounds. Others suggest they came from the same litters, chosen early for their temperament. There is even an inscription in the Temple of Karnak referring to the quiet-footed watchers of Ra, which some take to mean trained gazelles. And here is something strange. Some older healing texts reference the warmth of a gentle beast as a treatment for sleeplessness, anxiety, and spiritual disturbance. One remedy even prescribes a night spent beside a gazelle, provided she was calm, clean, and agreeable. You wonder what modern therapists would make of that? Probably needs more randomized trials. You glance back at the animal now, curled beside her little shrine of snacks and soft cloth. Her breathing remains steady. Every so often her ear twitches. And that's all. You've stopped thinking of her as a pet, really. More like a thread, a stitch that holds together the fabric of this household, unnoticed until it breaks. Essential, precisely because she isn't useful. Outside, someone hums. A lullaby, maybe? Or just a servant easing their way through a long night shift. Either way, the tune finds its way through the walls and into the room, where it settles into the space like another cushion. You close your eyes again, just for a moment. The air smells like old linen and mint. The room feels smaller now, quieter, like the whole world has folded itself around this one sleeping creature. You are still. She is still. And together, in the hush of ancient plaster and flickering oil light, you find the kind of peace that doesn't need explaining. It's morning again, though not that jarring kind of morning that comes with alarm bells and cold tile floors. No, this is an Egyptian morning warm, golden, and so quiet it seems like the whole world agreed to wake up slowly. You're already outside. The sun isn't high yet, and the household is in a gentle shuffle of preparation. Bread ovens smolder. Water jars are being filled, but the air remains slow, as if the day is tiptoeing forward rather than marching in. You stretch. The gazelle, just a few paces ahead, stretches too. She's been up longer than you, obviously. You catch sight of her beside a patch of clover growing along a courtyard wall. She chews slowly, eyes half-lidded, like someone savoring the last bite of a very familiar breakfast. A boy, perhaps 8 or 9, walks by holding a soft bundle wrapped in reed fibers. He sets it beside her with a kind of reverent, her morning treat. Inside, barley soaked in honey water and mashed dates. She glances at it, then back at her clover. She chooses the clover. The boy shrugs and walks off. Clearly, she wins most of these negotiations. The morning routine begins to unfold. Servants sweep the floors with bundled reeds. A young woman waters the flowering herbs near the edge of the estate garden. Somewhere behind you, a scribe yawns loudly, followed by the wet scratch of a reed pen testing ink. And through all of this, the gazelle just exists. You begin to realize she's not part of the routine. She is the routine. She doesn't perform or demand. She simply holds space, reminding everyone to move with softness, to observe without rushing. In temple texts from this era, there's a phrase repeated often: peace enters on still feet. Scholars aren't entirely sure what it refers to. A priest? Specific rite? But one particularly dreamy Egyptologist insists it's about gazelles. You'd believe it. You'd follow her down a narrow walkway flanked by tall walls of pale stone. The passage opens into a garden, unlike the others you've seen wilder, with longer grass, thicker vines, and no obvious human marks. This is her garden, not landscaped, just tolerated. Allowed to be a bit unkempt. You find a low stone bench and sit. The gazelle steps into the tall grass, her tan coat nearly invisible among the stalks. She walks through it like someone half forgotten and entirely content with that. You can barely see her now, just the flick of an ear. The ripple of green. You're told this part of the estate is rarely used by the family. It's more sanctuary than showcase. A space meant for the animal more than the human, which in a culture as hierarchical as ancient Egypt is surprisingly generous. And yet, as you observe this subtle ritual a pet, allowed to vanish for a moment into her wildness, you sense something deeply human in it, a kind of unspoken agreement. We won't cage you if you don't flee. And so far, that pact is held. Not all gazelles were this lucky. There are records faint. But reel of exotic animals brought in from Nubia or Libya, kept in cramped courtyards, fed improperly, eventually forgotten. Sometimes the keeping of an exotic pet was more about showing off than companionship. But in this household, at least, the animal seems to belong. You remember hearing of another estate, less refined, more military in function, where the general kept a pet gazelle strictly for target practice. A chilling detail. That story always ends the same way. The animal escapes one day and is never seen again, which probably means she didn't. But people need their legends. Back here in the garden, the gazelle reappears. It's just like that. Steps out of the grass, shakes once, and moves to a shaded spot near the wall. She curls down, almost folding herself into the earth, and rests her chin on her legs. She's not sleeping this time, just watching. And from her vantage point, she sees the house begin to buzz again. A robe flutters on a balcony. A jug is carried across the courtyard. The air hums with the slow preparations of a summer day. And she, this soft, poised creature, continues to do the only thing she's ever needed to do: be. It's strange how much of this ancient world revolved around symbols. Everything meant something. Crocodiles meant fertility. Scarabs meant protection. Cats meant divine vigilance. So what did a gazelle mean? Perhaps simply grace. The Egyptians were obsessed with harmony between earth and sky, man and spirit, order and chaos. And maybe, in their own quiet way, gazelles were harmony made flesh. Nothing dramatic, nothing divine. Just a long-legged whisper reminding everyone to tread lightly. You hear a distant shout, someone calling for help with a basket. The gazelle's ears twitch, but she doesn't move. She knows that voice. Not a threat, just noise. You watch her for a long while until the sun shifts high enough that even the garden's shadows begin to warm. She rises again, slow and elegant, and begins walking toward the far side of the estate. You follow because what else is there to do? You catch up just as she slips through another archway, this one leading into the wing where the family keeps their quietest treasures. Papyrus scrolls, ornamental fans, woven blankets older than anyone living. And in the center of it all, a small painted chest, its lid cracked slightly open. You glance inside. Inside is a simple ivory comb, a faded cloth, and folded very carefully a collar. Not for restraint. Decorative. Woven with tiny blue stones and brass threading. You hold it up, and for a moment you see the gazelle wearing it not in reality, but in a quiet imagined scene from decades ago. Maybe she wore it once for a procession, or maybe it belonged to another gazelle long gone. Either way, it's been saved, not discarded, not sold, held on to. As one might hold on to the memory of a calm day or a quiet walk through grass, you've set it down again, carefully, like a relic, 'cause here it is. You're sitting now in a wide, shaded hall, lined with stone columns shaped like bundled papyrus reeds. The heat of midday presses gently against the outer walls, but in here, it's cool and dark, like the inside of a clay jar. The only movement comes from a gauzy curtain stirring at the far end, and the soft click of hooves as the gazelle wanders in. She's not alone. Today is something of a ceremonial day, though it's not grand or loud. The family is observing a quiet rite, a small procession through the estate honoring the coming of the flood season. While the main temples prepare for public rituals along the Nile, noble households stage their own versions, more intimate, more symbolic. The family has gathered in their finest linen, nothing gaudy, just formal. The air smells faintly of frankincense and bruised mint. A few musicians hum a slow rhythm on hand drums, low and steady. And then, as if on cue, the gazelle steps forward, her body brushed, her hooves oiled, and around her neck, that same bluestone collar you found earlier. She is not the centerpiece, but she is part of the choreography. She walks near the youngest daughter, who leads the line with a palm branch in her hand. No leash, no tether, just a mutual understanding. Step by step they move together. You trail behind quietly, the cool of the stone floor seeping into your feet. You realize now that this isn't performance, it's ritualized routine, a reenactment of balance. The gazelle doesn't need to understand the meaning of the procession. Her mere presence provides it. In the procession's center, someone carries a shallow bowl of water drawn from the Nile earlier that morning. It's meant to symbolize rebirth. Nearby, the family's most delicate possessions, papyrus scrolls, oil flasks, a faded amuletar walk through the hall like honored guests. And the gazelle? She keeps perfect pace, glancing now and then at the girl beside her, then forward again. Step, step, pause. There are records, slight, barely translated, that describe similar rituals in noble houses, where certain animals were chosen to absorb the intentions of peace. While cats were believed to keep out evil spirits, gazelles were said to welcome stillness in. They carry no fear, one fragment reads. They make still the soil where they step. Historians still argue whether this was literal belief or poetic flattery, but either way the result is the same: reverence. This is where the rite concludes, not with chanting or sacrifice, but with rest. The offerings are set down, musicians stop, servant brings out cool water, and the gazelle, finally, is allowed to curl on the softest mat near the window. She looks pleased. If a gazelle can look pleased, a soft laugh passes through the room. The father says something about how she walks straighter than his sons. Someone else jokes that she should be given her own room in the ancestral tomb. The comment earns a few raised eyebrows. Not because it's disrespectful, but because it's a little too sincere. You begin to understand. The gazelle is not a mascot. She's not decoration. She's something subtler, a gentle interruption. In a culture obsessed with control of nature, of the body, of legacy, this nervous, graceful creature demands gentleness without saying a word. And you see it again that evening, after the ritual is over. Back in the smaller courtyard, a scribe has taken up his stylus, not to record an inventory, not to log a shipment. He's sketching, quietly, slowly, the lines of a gazelle taking form on the reed-thin scroll. You glance at the drawing, this one different from the others. She's not in motion. She's not posing. She's resting. Long legs folded beneath her, eyes closed, ears relaxed, completely still. The scribe dips his pen again and adds something beneath the figure. Can't read all of it. Some of the ink is blurred, but the phrase ends in, "Who walks without disturbing?" Later, you return to the hall alone. The torches have burned low. Moonlight cuts across the floor in neat ribbons. And in that moment, you think about how strange it is to love something that does not speak your language, does not obey, and might one day disappear without warning. And yet the Egyptians did, or at least this family did. There is a scroll tucked in one alcove that tells of a noble woman who requested her favorite gazelle be buried with her. She walked beside me in gardens, it says, and taught my heart to go slowly. There's no record of whether the wish was fulfilled. But the mere fact that it was written down tells you everything. You head back to your sleeping mat now. The stars are thick overhead, clustered like beads on a necklace. The house is silent, except for the occasional creak of rope or the rustle of wind through papyrus blinds. The gazelle sleeps again beside the window. Her side rises and falls, slow and steady. And as you lie down, folding your hands beneath your head, you wonder not about pyramids or pharaohs, not about war or gold, but about this quiet creature who asked for nothing and was given sanctuary. In a world of gods and tombs and armies, she made her mark with silence, and somehow that was enough. You awaken to a sound so soft it barely qualifies as noise. The faint brushing of hooves on woven reed matting. The gazelle is already up, moving like a ghost through the corridor's first light. A band of sun stretches across the floor, and her coat gleams where it passes through, warm, golden, almost divine. Sit up slowly, careful not to startle her. She looks at you, then back to her path. She knows her route, her purpose. You're simply in her quiet orbit. Today, you've been invited to accompany her to the market. That's right, the market. Not as a buyer, of course. Gazelles don't carry coin purses. But it turns out that this particular one has grown comfortable in the more public spaces of the town. Comfortable enough, in fact, to occasionally accompany the steward or the lady of the house to the outer stalls. It's not exactly common, you're told, but it's not a spectacle either. This town knows her. People pause when she walks by, not to gawk, but to smile. She's a gentle interruption in their day. A reminder that even amidst hagglers, dust, and debate over fish prices, something soft still exists. You walk beside her through the estate gates and into the outer city. The air is busier, here saltier, filled with spices, sweat, and distant clanging. The gazelle doesn't flinch. She's alert, yes, but measured. Her head held high, her pace steady. Vendors wave from under linen awnings. Man selling carved amulets calls out, "The little queen returns." A woman arranging bundles of fresh dill gives a low bow and mutters something about good omens. Children tug at sleeves and whisper, "Don't touch her, she's sacred." Their mothers chuckle but say nothing to correct them. It's not official religion. She's not listed among the gods. But reverence takes many forms. You stop at a spice merchant's stall. The steward selects packets of coriander and powdered fenugreek. The gazelle leans forward and sniffs a crate of dried hibiscus blossoms. The merchant grins. She always chooses the best. She has a nose for celebration. The steward smiles politely and pays in copper ringlets. Catch the faintest tilt of the gazelle's head, as if she understands currency, or at least understands that the humans think it matters. Historians still argue about this kind of thing, whether the Egyptians truly brought pets into public life, or if that was a later embellishment. But wall paintings don't lie. In some scenes, gazelles are shown beside their owners, not just in the home, but in public, mingling among musicians and merchants. If it didn't happen often, it certainly happened sometimes. You pause at a small fountain carved into a wall, just a trickle of water pouring from the mouth of a lion-headed spout. The gazelle drinks, careful not to wet her legs. A boy tries to pet her and is gently pulled back by his older sister. "You watch," she says. "You don't touch, Grace." There's a short alley near the edge of the market that opens into a pocket garden, just a rectangle of herbs, a few palm trees, and a bench. The steward leads the gazelle here to rest before returning home. You sit quietly beside her as the bustle fades behind you. She's still, but not rigid. You can see her nostrils twitching, her ears adjusting like tiny satellites. Even here she is aware, but not afraid. You think about what it means for an animal like this, bred for speed. Born for the open scrublands to walk freely through a market and settle calmly in a garden. It speaks less to training and more to trust. Somewhere along the way, this creature decided the world was safe enough to stop running. That trust, fragile as it may be, holds the whole relationship together. A servant appears, carrying a small linen pouch. He pulls out a sweet barley cake and offers it. The gazelle takes it gently, one nibble at a time. Then she lowers her head and rests it on her folded legs. Nap time, you ask yourself? What is this really? A luxury? A living ornament? A household's peculiar pride? Or is she something more, an anchor to a slower rhythm of life? A living reminder to pause, to soften, to notice the silence between footsteps. There's a clay tablet in a nearby archive that contains a poem, unsigned. It's fragmentary, but the lines still read. I fed her with my own hands, and the sun bent around her body. She never spoke, but in her stillness, I heard the gods. It's not bad for something scratched by candlelight 3,000 years ago. You sit with the gazelle for a while longer, the scent of mint and cumin drifting in from the nearby stalls. The garden is modest, just enough shade, just enough green butt here, with her beside you. It feels like the center of the world. Eventually, it's time to return. The steward stands, brushing dust from his robes. The gazelle rises too, graceful as always, and begins her walk home. The town seems calmer on the way back, like everyone's heartbeats slowed slightly after seeing her. You step through the estate gates again. The shade of the inner courtyard welcomes you like an old friend. The gazelle pauses, then walks toward the familiar comfort of her mat near the fountain. She sighs once, long and low, and then she sleeps. Afternoon in the estate arrives like a lullaby, subtle, slow, and thick with heat. The kind of heat that wraps around stone and settles into fabric, that makes even birdsong sound tired. The air smells of lemon balm and sun-warmed grain, and for a moment you don't move. You simply sit beside the courtyard wall watching. The gazelle is awake again, but she's not rushing anywhere. She stretches with that strange elegance only animals possess legs, unfolding like origami, spine arcing in a soft ripple. She rises and walks with no purpose, just a kind of exploratory drifting. You follow. The household itself seems to echo her pace. A woman turns papyrus scrolls without urgency. Two servants gossip over linen folding. Even the kitchen, usually bustling with frantic preparations, is caught in this heat-induced trance. Flatbreads puff slowly in a clay oven, and the cook brushes honey glaze without looking up. And still, the gazelle glides between everyone like a living breeze, not demanding attention, but always noticed, always part of the texture. You're led to a side wing, a quieter part of the house used for craftwork and storage. Here in the filtered light between wooden beams, artisans sit on woven mats shaping ivory, combing flax and dyeing linen. They glance up, smile at the gazelle, then return to their work. Clearly, she's a regular visitor. She pauses beside a woman who's embroidering a sash with tiny cobalt beads. The woman gently lifts one of the beads and holds it toward the gazelle. A joke, probably. The gazelle sniffs it, unimpressed, and moves on. The woman chuckles softly and adds the bead to her thread anyway. Historians sometimes overlook these spaces, these quiet, functional rooms where life unfolded in small, repetitive gestures. But here's where you begin to understand. This was the heart of the house, not the grand hall or the decorated shrine, not the incense-scented library or the imported marbled atrium. It was here in the pulse of craft and chatter that a house lived, and among it all, the gazelle moved like a blessing. There's an unfinished mural on one wall, just outlines, faint pigment. It shows a family seated under date palms, children playing at their feet. Next to them, almost hidden, a small tan shape with long legs and alert ears. A pet, yes, but also a participant. We retold of a noble woman from a nearby region who once described her pet gazelle as my silence, stitched to my feet. A poetic phrase, though scholars still debate whether she meant emotional comfort or the fact that the animal followed her so closely it became part of her shadow, possibly both. In the workshop, the gazelle curls up in a corner where the sun hits just right. One artisan shifts a basket to make space for her. Another nudges a pottery shard out of her reach. No orders, no instructions. Just an unspoken agreement. She belongs here. The artisans continue their work. One hums. Another tells a soft, silly story about a neighbor who mistook their goose for a god. The room smells of straw and wet pigment. The gazelle sleeps. And in that stillness, you begin to notice the rhythm of hands, the scraping of dye brushes, the click of bead against bead, the rustle of rushes being woven into mats. You close your eyes for a moment, and it's like listening to a river of small, careful sounds. Imagine this. A scribe years from now finding a linen band with a stitched gazelle at its center. No context, no name, just the figure curled in sleep. He might wonder if it was a symbol of peace, a crest, a prayer, and he wouldn't be wrong. You open your eyes. The gazelle is still sleeping, legs tucked neatly, ears twitching in rhythm with her dreams. Someone walks in from the sunlit hallway with a dish of water and a scrap of palm leaf shade to drape over the doorway. Not because they were told to, just because they noticed. That's the thing about her. She inspires attentiveness. Not awe, not urgency, Just that gentle, golden kind of care that often gets forgotten in louder histories. You're reminded of a myth rare. Half lost where the god Thoth sends a gazelle to guide a grieving queen through the underworld. The animal doesn't speak, doesn't lead, simply walks beside her until she's ready to return. The message: some journeys don't need maps, just company. A whisper of breeze stirs the doorway curtain. The gazelle lifts her head, then lowers it again. No threat, no reason to move. You settle into the wall's coolness behind you and begin to drift. The artisans work. The gazelle breathes. Afternoon thickens like honey. And in this quiet workshop, where beads are strung and linen is smoothed and history leaves no names, something rare has happened. You've stopped thinking in centuries. You've stopped trying to understand the grand designs of pharaohs or the architecture of power. You're simply here, breathing, listening, watching a sleeping animal soften a room built for labor. Time flows differently now. Afternoon drips into early evening like oil from a clay jug, slow, deliberate, with no need for measure. The house is preparing for its quietest meal of the day. The dusk meal, not the formal supper, but something softer. Leftovers, fruits, chilled wine from amphory, buried in the earth for hours. The kind of meal eaten without conversation. Just the sounds of chewing, pouring, and sighing. And of course, the gentle rhythm of hooves as the gazelle makes her rounds. She emerges from the workshop wing blinking, still shaking sleep from her long limbs. A yawn not vocal, but visible ripples through her face as she stretches. Someone laughs quietly. Servant offers her a fig. She sniffs it, takes half, drops the rest with theatrical precision. You follow her into the garden again. This time she's not seeking clover or mint. She's following scent trails. Her own, perhaps, or that of a lizard that passed hours ago. She sniffs a low bowl of water, but doesn't drink. Pauses beside the tree where a cat sleeps in the high branches. She's not bothered. The cat knows better. The garden is thicker now with the scent of warm earth and crushed herbs. A nearby brazier crackles softly. Someone is toasting coriander seeds. Catch the faintest aroma of roasted garlic and honeyed onions. The kind of meal that fills your nose before it reaches your mouth. The gazelle doesn't eat cooked food, but she likes to be near it. A habit formed from curiosity, or perhaps simply a long history of being welcome to every part of the household. She lingers near the cooking alcove, then steps through a doorway you haven't noticed before. Inside is the informal dining space, a room with low tables, long mats, and a thick air of satisfaction. The family sits in loose robes, reclining as they nibble, sip, rest. The gazelle enters without ceremony. No one calls her. No one gestures. She simply steps into the space and chooses a corner near the youngest son, who has saved her a scrap of melon. This is not indulgence. This is rhythm. Historians sometimes get tripped up here. Is this animal really allowed to enter the dining room? Wouldn't that break religious codes or household structure? But again, the evidence speaks softly but clearly. Fragments of wall paintings show animals beside meals, sometimes dogs, sometimes cats, and yes, occasionally gazelles. Scrolls refer to the guest who does not eat, but is always full. A poetic way of describing a presence that adds nothing, and yet somehow completes the scene. Tonight the gazelle does nothing remarkable. She eats her melon. She sits. She scratches her neck on the table leg. She closes her eyes. But in doing so, she becomes the punctuation mark on the family's day. The full stop that signals. Now we rest. A servant enters with cool water in alabaster cups. Another places a folded cloth over the lady's shoulders. The patriarch picks seeds from his teeth with a sliver of ivory. Nobody speaks. Nobody has to. And yet there's communication happening all over the room. Glances, small smiles. The quiet language of people who've learned to share space without competing for it. The gazelle is their ambassador of silence. You find yourself breathing more slowly. There's a story in a lesser-known funerary text about a nobleman who, upon death, requested that his household continue offering food to the quiet companion, whom scholars assume to be a gazelle. She taught me the meaning of lightness, the inscription reads. Not in weight, but in presence. You wonder if she knew. If the gazelle had any sense of her role, or if, like all truly sacred things, she was just living her life. A servant gently clears the melon rind from beside her. The gazelle stands. She doesn't leave immediately, just turns, as if reminding everyone that night is coming and movement must resume. Outside, the sky is pink and blue in that impossible way that only happens when the air is thick with heat and dust and silence. The torches are lit. The house shifts again, neither active nor asleep, but floating somewhere between. The gazelle makes one final round, stepping softly past the doorways of each family member. A ritual, perhaps. Or just habit. She pauses outside the girl's room, the one who gave her bread the night before. The door is open. A lullaby drifts out. The gazelle leans in, then walks on, and you follow her back to the courtyard where the stars are beginning to gather. She settles in her usual spot. No drama, no flourish. It's just a slow fold of limbs, a soft breath, and stillness. You lie down nearby, eyes on the sky. The breeze carries traces of mint, oil, fig, and sleep. The scent of a day well lived. And beside you, a creature who did nothing extraordinary, and in doing so made everything feel sacred, not through force, not through wisdom, but through presence. The stars over the estate begin to thicken, gathering like dust motes caught in the fabric of the night. Somewhere, a jar lid closes. A final torch is snuffed, and slowly, like a great beast, easing down into its own warmth, the household drifts into silence. You're still awake. The air is soft, now barely moving, barely thinking. Even the insects hum more slowly. And across the courtyard, curled in her usual spot, the gazelle sleeps. Not deeply, but with trust. Every now and then she twitches, not out of fear, but memory. Her legs jerk, subtly rehearsing a run she hasn't made in years. You wonder what she dreams of. A field. Another gazelle. A fig just out of reach. Or maybe nothing at all. Maybe sleep, for her, is simply peace without narration. You take a slow breath. There. An old household scroll tucked in a merchant archive that reads, "When the silence of night returns." No. Words have fled. We ask only for two things. Cool air and the company of something calm. You glance over. She's still calm. It's easy to forget how rare that is, this creature who should, by all accounts, be anxious, flighty, fragile. And yet here she is, breathing in the dark, not as prey, not as guest, but as resident. And this is the part history never really captures, the way presence changes people. It's one thing to say the Egyptians kept animals as pets. It's another thing entirely to understand how the quiet of those animals shaped the rhythm of a home. Even in death, they lingered. Some tombs, especially those of the upper class, included depictions of gazelles, etched into offering tables, painted behind thrones, even carved onto the legs of beds. Not dramatic images, just peaceful ones. Always curled, always watching. Archaeologists still debate their purpose. Some claim symbolic fertility. Others suggest they were merely decorative.
Odd.
But there's one Stelia small one, no taller than your knee, inscribed with a phrase that makes the answer simpler. To remind me of peace when I forget. That's what she is, you realize. Duh. Not to power or property or legacy, but to something softer. Something is lively lost in the clamor of life. A child's laugh echoes faintly down the hall. Then silence again. You turn your head. The gazelle opens one eye. She sees you, holds your gaze, then slowly closes it again. She knows you're there. There's an old folk belief, mostly ignored by formal scribes, but whispered in kitchen corners and servant halls, that animals absorb the echoes of a house, that if treated well, they carry away the sadness, that their stillness soaks up fear, and that their breath in the dark smooths out the day's sharp edges. You think of the way the mat is always set for her, of how the artisan shifted to make room, of how the boy in the market gave her melon without asking. These are not the acts of indulgence. They're acts of ritual, small repetitions that over time become sacred. And perhaps the gazelle, in her own soft way, performs a ritual too. She walks the same paths, pauses at the same doorways, sleeps in the same beam of moonlight, as if reminding the house. Here is where calm lives. Here is where breath returns. You hear a nightjar outside the wall, a soft call, one note, and quiet again. The stars seem lower now, the air cooler. You glance again, the gazelle is completely still. Could almost mistake her for a statue, were it not for the gentle rise and fall of her ribs. Her sleep is undisturbed, anchored by routine, protected by familiarity. And in a strange way, you feel protected too, by her presence, by the steadiness of her life, by the fact that despite wars and dynasties and floods and funerals, someone in this house once said, "Let her stay," and so she did. There's a lull in time now, a pause too wide to step across. You think about how many other animals were allowed this grace, how many other homes carved out corners, not just for survival, but for quiet. Maybe not many, but some. And sometimes, some is enough. The breeze shifts again, the reed mat rustles. Someone breathes out, long and low, from another room. And in the courtyard beside the last bowl of water, a gazelle sleeps like she belongs, 'cause here she does. Morning returns not suddenly, but as a gentle unfolding. First the light changes, then the scents, then the sounds. You wake before the first footsteps echo through the hallways, before the servants begin their rustling, before the courtyard is warmed by the sun. The gazelle is already standing. She's watching the sky, or maybe the tree, or maybe nothing at all. Her stance is soft but certain, as if the stillness of the night has been gently folded up and packed into her bones for safekeeping. You sit up quietly. There's no need to speak. Today feels different, not grand or ominous, just rare. You've been invited beyond the estate, toward the river. It's not a trip they take often with her, but sometimes, especially at the start of a new lunar cycle, the family walks the path to the Nile to make small offerings. And yes, the gazelle goes too. There's an unspoken reverence in the preparation. The basket is packed, figs, sprigs of sweet marjoram, a vial of scented oil. A thin length of linen is wrapped around the basket's rim to keep everything in place. A servant opens the front gate, not with force, but with a kind of theatrical slowness. Ash! The gazelle steps forward, then pauses. You watch as she tilts her head toward the east, sniffing the softest edge of the breeze. Then she begins to walk. There are no roads here, only worn footpaths winding through tall grass, broken stone, and morning silence. You pass olive trees, their branches already shifting in the new sun, and flocks of ibis rising, slow and startled, from shallow pools. No one rushes. Even the family's pace seems borrowed from the animal that walks just ahead of them. You come to a small plateau overlooking the Nile. It's not a grand temple site, just a flat space, marked by a single standing stone, worn smooth from years of small personal rituals. The family spreads a reed mat. The basket is opened. Each offering is laid out slowly, with care, not for show, but for presence. The figs, the oil, a small loaf shaped like an ankh, and then something you didn't expect. A handful of soft barley is poured into a second bowl. One placed not beside the others, but near the gazelle. She approaches, eats, slowly, respectfully. This isn't feeding, it's inclusion. You think of a verse scratched into the wall of a distant tomb, likely by a child pretending to be a priest. The gods love those who remember their animals. Perhaps this isn't theology. Perhaps it's just love. The gazelle lingers near the edge of the plateau, watching the water. Her ears flick, adjusting to the calls of distant fishermen and the whir of insects rising with the heat. Someone murmurs a prayer, not formal, just a few words into the wind. And the gazelle, as if sensing that something meaningful has passed, lies down at the edge of the mat. Her body curves into the shadow. Her breathing slows again. You imagine this scene from above? A family? A river? A single still creature holding space at the seam between earth and water? There's no crowd, no temple guards, no scribes etching the moment into stone. But somehow, you know this will be remembered. There's a kind of memory that lives in repetition, in the rhythm of walking the same path, setting the same mat, pouring the same barley. And in the center of it all, a gazelle who asks for nothing but is given everything. You sit with her until the sun climbs high enough to warm your knees. Eventually, the mat is folded, the basket repacked. But the bowl near her is left behind, barley and all. You glance at the family. They do not explain. They do not look back. They know she understands. Or maybe it's they who understand her. The walk home is quieter. The gazelle moves in no hurry, stopping once to nibble a vine curling from a rock, and again to watch a kingfisher dart into the reeds. She's not being watched, she's simply being. A servant hums a slow tune, probably older than anyone here can name. You recognize no words, but the tone is clear. Gratitude, stillness, return. When you pass back through the estate gate, the light is changed again. The shade is more welcome, the stone cooler beneath your feet. The house exhales, as if relieved that everyone has returned whole, and the gazelle. She returns to her mat, not out of routine, but choice. She lies down, folds her limbs, closes her eyes. You don't need to be told this was a sacred day, not because of the offerings, not because of the Nile, but because she was there. The estate breathes with a deeper quiet now, not the silence of sleep, but the hush that follows something meaningful, like the stillness after a long laugh, or the pause after a song you didn't realize was your favorite. You feel it in your ribs. Even the stone walls seem to echo less. The gazelle lies on her mat again, limbs folded like fine linen, eyes half-lidded, not quite asleep. It's the kind of rest you take when you know the day has already given you enough. You sit nearby. A servant passes, carrying a bundle of palm fronds for weaving. She nods at you, but doesn't speak. She's humming. A low, looping tune. The kind of melody that doesn't end so much as dissolve. You listen for a while, then return your gaze to the gazelle. She blinks. Once. You're not sure when it happened, but her presence now feels inseparable from the household. She's no longer a gazelle kept by the family. She's just theirs. Like the courtyard. Like the soft white stone. Like the silence between prayers. And she is old. You hadn't realized it at first, not with her grace, her brightness. But now that you're still, now that your eyes have learned the rhythm of this place, you can see it. The slower blink. The careful steps. The slight hesitation before she lies down. She's aging. There's no panic in it, no mourning. Just acceptance, carried on the breeze. You remember a line a scribe once scrawled in a corner margin? Even the gazelles of the house learn to walk like the elders. There's something beautiful in that. That an animal born to run could, over time, learn the art of stillness, not out of fear or brokenness, but from sheer belonging. You glance toward a nearby wall where faded ink shows a woman cradling a small animal, perhaps a dog, perhaps a gazelle. The image is simple. No headdresses, no hieroglyphs of divine approval, just quiet hands and closed eyes. That, too, is history. The gazelle shifts. Small sound escapes her, a soft HMFF like a breath pushed sideways. Then stillness again. You wonder what happens to animals like her when they die. It's a difficult thought, and the Egyptians did not shy away from it. Death, for them, was not an ending, but a continuation. But did that philosophy extend to pets? Evidence says. There are mummified cats, of course, and ibises, and even the occasional baboon. But gazelles? Rarer. Still, there are tombs, modest ones, where their images appear, sometimes with offerings placed in niches nearby. One scroll speaks of a gazelle buried with her mistress, wrapped in linen, her collar placed at her feet, not out of necessity, but out of gratitude. Her presence taught me how to breathe without hurry, the woman wrote. So I bring her with me to the next world, that I may continue to remember. Historians still argue whether this was metaphor, wishful thinking, or literal practice. But the truth is, it doesn't really matter. Because what you feel now, sitting beside this gentle animal as she dreams, is real. It may not last forever, but that only makes it more sacred. A light breeze stirs the surface of the courtyard pool. You watch the ripples stretch and soften. Somewhere, a reed flute plays a few notes, then stops. It's not a performance, just someone practicing alone. The gazelle lifts her head, sniffs the air, then closes her eyes again. You think about how rare it is in life and intramodern to be allowed to simply exist, to be protected without condition. It's not for what you can offer or how you can serve, but just for being gentle in a world that often forgets how. And you realize this house has remembered. Somewhere in its architecture, in its shadows, in its rituals, it carved out space for peace. And peace chose long legs and soft eyes. Servant kneels beside the gazelle now. Slowly, respectfully, she offers her a shallow bowl of water. Gazelle drinks.
At.
Not because she's parched, but because she's used to being given care without demand. The servant stays for a moment, just resting her hand near the animal's shoulder, not touching, just close enough to feel the warmth. They sit like that for a while, just two beings in the fading light, sharing nothing but breath. You watch, you breathe. For a brief, aching moment, you understand the entire philosophy of this house. Let what is quiet remain undisturbed. Let what is soft remain untouched. Let what is fleeting be remembered. And then let it rest. The next day arrives without fanfare. There is no ritual, no loud bell to announce it, just a gentle warmth creeping along the floor, tugging gently at the linen curtains and wrapping itself around the edges of the courtyard. Birds are already busy. The estate's dogius. There's a dog, too. But he knows his place in the pecking order, barks once, and promptly goes back to sleep. And in the corner, exactly where you last saw her, the gazelle is already awake. She doesn't stand yet. Her breathing is slow and steady. You realize she's watching the dappled light dance across the floor, the way it filters through palm fronds. Watching it, not chasing it. This is her version of meditation. You sit beside her again, as you've grown used to doing. There's no rush today. No errands, no river visits, no guests. Just a day for the house to be what it is. A quiet space tucked within louder surroundings. A steward passes, nods toward the animal, and mutters, "She's been here longer than the youngest son." Then he disappears into the kitchen with a jug of lentils. As if he said something profound. It's true. She's part of the household lineage now. Not just an animal they keep, but a thread woven into the very pattern of their daily lives. Children mark time by her. Servants use her behavior to predict weather. Sneeze from her is to one elderly cook, a reliable sign of coming rain. And yet, no one owns her. Not truly. There are no leashes, no shackles, no commands. Just presence, mutual, gentle, constant. You remember something from your walk through the market days ago? A carving on a stall's wooden post? It showed a stylized gazelle with a single lotus tucked behind its ear. Beside it were scratched the words, "She who walks slowly will not be forgotten." A merchant's philosophy, or perhaps just a love letter to a household pet. Still, the idea lingers. In a culture so obsessed with grandeur, pyramids, monuments, tombs that touch the stars, it's oddly comforting that such care could also be given to something so small, so quiet. Later, a young girl, the same one who sang lullabies the other night, joins you in the courtyard. She's carrying something in her hands. A necklace of reeds, strung together haphazardly but lovingly, with small shards of painted clay dangling from the twine. She kneels beside the gazelle, whispers something you can't hear, and gently places the necklace near the mat. Not on her, just nearby. A gift with no expectations. The gazelle glances at it, sniffs, then rests her chin beside it. That's enough. You wonder how many moments like this go unrecorded in scrolls and stone. How many tiny rituals, acts of tenderness, of noticing our loss between the louder moments of history. Wars, reigns, edicts. Yes, they matter. But they don't tell you how people lived. This does. How they loved, how they softened, how they made space for grace. A servant brings figs again. The gazelle takes one gently, holding it in her mouth without chewing, like she's savoring the idea of it more than the flavor itself. She's older now, that much is clear. Her legs are stiff when she stands, her breath slower, her naps longer. But no one speaks of this. There are no whispered warnings, no plans made in the shadows. They simply let her be. Because being existing gently is what she has taught them. You walk with her later, slowly, through the outer garden. She no longer runs, but her gait is still elegant, step deliberate, light. She pauses under a fig tree. You both stand there a while. The wind picks up, rustling the branches above. Few leaves fall. The gazelle watches them drift, following their path all the way to the dirt. You swear she sighs, and maybe she does. You think back to that funerary inscription, the one that spoke of a gazelle being taken into the afterlife, not as a possession, but as a companion. It suddenly feels very real, very plausible. If anyone ever deserved to be remembered, not for greatness, but for gentleness, it's her. Not because she did anything grand, but because she reminded a household how to move slowly, how to notice silence, how to rest. And now, standing under the fig tree, with her by your side, you realize she's taught you to. The sky is turning a golden gray as you sit by the courtyard pool once more. It's nearing the end of the day, and there's a hush over the estate that feels heavier than usual. Not sorrowful, exactly, just full. Like the air itself is holding something it can't quite speak. The gazelle has barely moved all afternoon. She's not in pain, not distressed, just tired. Tired in the way that old things get when they know they've done enough. A servant lays a soft linen cloth beside her. It's the same servant who gave her the necklace of reeds as a girl, now older, more careful. She smooths the cloth with both hands, then steps away. The gazelle doesn't react. But you know she felt it. You're still by her side, as you have been for days now. And somehow, without instruction, the rest of the household has begun to move around you in soft, circular patterns, preparing food more quietly, sweeping with longer strokes, humming low songs that carry more memory than melody. It's as if everyone knows this rhythm is winding down. You think of that old merchant carving again. She who walks slowly will not be forgotten. She's not walking today, but she is present. And so are you. There's an old belief that animals, when close to passing, return to the place where they felt most like themselves. Some scholars dismiss this as superstition. Others call it instinct. But the people of this estate, though they rarely say it aloud, know it as truth. The gazelle hasn't tried to leave the courtyard in days. She doesn't seek the garden, or the open door, or the fig trees. This is her place, not because she's confined, but because it holds her. The youngest child, barely 5, approaches now, tiptoeing across the stone. He carries a single blue flower, plucked from the shadowed edge of the herb beds. He kneels, places it near the gazelle's front leg. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't need to. He stays there beside her for a moment, then leans his head lightly against her flank, listening. Then he gets up and walks away without a word. You watch the gazelle breathe. In, out, in, out. It's not labored, but it's slow. Slower than before. She's fading, but not disappearing. Because in this courtyard, every breeze that passes will carry a trace of her. Every mat laid out will remember the weight of her rest. Every child who sits in the sun will feel the warmth she once drew into herself. You remember something you overheard once in the market, said by a woman with too many bangles and not enough teeth? You know a house is at peace if even the animals grow old in it. And this house, this place of woven reeds, fig trees, soft bread, and softer footsteps, is a temple of peace. You hear the cook humming from the kitchen, something low, with no words. The same tune she sang when the gazelle was young, leaping awkwardly across the courtyard. You wonder if she realizes it. Maybe she does. Maybe they all do. Because the truth is, the gazelle didn't just live in the house, she helped shape it.
Ow.
She was a mirror that reflected back the gentleness in everyone who touched her. A slow-moving measure of the household's softness, its willingness to pause, its ability to nurture. And now she rests. Her eyes flutter. Her chest rises once more, then stills. You don't panic. No one does. Because this moment, sad as it is also perfect, unrushed, undramatic, complete. A soft silence follows. Then a wind stirs through the courtyard, lifts a few petals from the blue flower by her leg, and carries them away over the pool, past the doors, out into the world. You stay beside her, not because there's anything to do, but because presence, even now, is enough. The sun lowers behind the garden wall. The torches are not lit tonight. Instead, the estate goes to bed in the dark, wrapped in the quiet grace of something beautiful that passed gently, with no sound but breath. That night, the house moves more slowly than ever. Not in grief, not in the way we often picture it, with wailing or collapsing or dramatic gestures, but in a quiet, contemplative way, like a deep breath that doesn't quite leave your lungs. The gazelle's mat remains in the courtyard. No one has touched it. No one will for a while. You walk past it in the moonlight, and it feels strange and holy and right. She's not there. But the space still feels full. The household follows its normal rhythm. Bread is baked, linen is folded, papyrus is unrolled. But everything is softened now, like someone turned down the world's volume. In one of the smaller chambers, someone is painting. A piece of limestone, smoothed by time, now holds a figure drawn in the gentle curve of ochre and lapis. 4 long legs, a high head, not exact but unmistakable. It's her. The artist doesn't need to say so. And that's the power of presence, isn't it? Even after she's gone, no one needs to explain her. She's in the way they walk, slower now, more deliberate. In the hush before someone enters a room, the instinct to pause when the breeze lifts. The girl who once sang lullabies now carries a bundle of herbs to lay by the mat. She doesn't cry, but she stands for a long time after, just being there. Historians sometimes overlook these things. They want records, edicts, grand tombs. But a house like this, a living, breathing rhythm of people and animal woven into one story, is harder to measure. Yet here it is. Tomorrow the mat will be moved. A little shrine may be built, or maybe just a bowl of barley, refreshed each morning, not out of superstition, but memory. A few of the elders speak in low voices that evening about the old story that the souls of animals who live peacefully become part of the breeze. That on hot nights they come back as cooling winds, curling through rooms and reminding us how to sit still. You smile when the wind does come late just before sleep. A breeze that carries the faintest scent of fig leaves and mint and dust-warmed fur. You sit in the courtyard one last time. The moon is higher now. The mat remains untouched. Single palm frond has landed across it, gently as a hand. You remember the words, etched on that old weathered stele, to remind me of peace when I forget. She already has. And even now, long after her breath has stopped, you feel her presence guiding the rhythm of your own. Slower, softer, more aware. This house will change. Children will grow. Servants will leave. Stones will crack. time will press forward. But somewhere in the center of it all, there will always be the memory of 4 graceful legs, the hush of hooves on cool stone, and the steady beat of a creature who asked for nothing but gave. Stillness, you close your eyes, you rest. And now, as the house settles once more into its timeless breath, let yourself sink deeper into stillness. The torches have long since gone out. The courtyard lies empty, but never truly alone. The scent of fig leaves and linen lingers, mixing with the hush of nighttime air, cool against your skin. The mat remains faded but unforgotten, and in your mind you still see her every step deliberate, every glance calm, every pause meaningful. You've walked the pathways of an ancient estate. You've tasted the rhythms of a life that flowed not in drama, but in gentleness. You've watched a creature live and rest completely. And perhaps now it's your turn. Let the world slow down around you. Let your breath become a whisper, in and out. Feel the stone beneath you, cool and still. Feel the night wrap around you like linen worn smooth by years of touch. You don't need to remember the names or the dates or the monuments. You only need to remember the quiet, the gaze of an old gazelle at peace, the house that chose to follow her rhythm. So wherever you are, whatever time, whatever place, know that you are welcome here. This is your mat. This is your silence.
Right.
This is your breath, and you are not forgotten. Not tonight. Not ever. Good night. And before you drift all the way into sleep, just a quiet thank you from me to you for sharing this moment, for letting your mind wander through the soft folds of ancient history. If this story helped you relax, unwind, or simply forget the day for a little while, I'd be so grateful if you hit that subscribe button, not out of habit only, if it truly brought you peace. Wishing you the gentlest dreams. And I'll see you again soon, right here. Good night.